What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, and today we are talking about the Demon Lords of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. So a couple things. One, we're kind of continuing our Halloween theme here, as it is the day before Halloween when this is going live. And I figured what better way to do that than talk about the Demon Lords themselves that we encounter in-game. That said, an important distinction there is that I said in-game, because the way the adventure paths for the actual tabletop work is that each adventure path kind of marches forward time, so to speak, and that technically what happens to some of these Demon Lords is actually pretty specific outside of, say, your personal run of the adventure path. So I'm not really going to be covering a lot of that stuff because I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as much as I can. Just the very nature of this video and how tied to the plot some of these Demon Lords are makes that very difficult to do. So be warned of spoilers here and there. Some major, some minor. It's just a hard thing to avoid when talking about this. But we're going to go over some of the Demon Lords we meet in game, some anecdotes about them, just some cool stuff that you might find interesting. And to kick it off, we have the very first one we see in-game, and that is none other than Daskari, the Lord of Locusts and Infestations. Now, Daskari is the son of Pazuzu, which is another Demon Lord in-game that we don't actually see. Now, Daskari obviously kind of serves as the main antagonist of the game, if you will, or at least one of the primary antagonists might be a more accurate way to put that. And Daskari is kind of directly credited with opening the world wound itself, and is one of the many Demon Lords that Arilu Vorlesh has worked with in her ever-expanding goals of power. Now, next up, we have Nocticula. You will interact with Nocticula quite a bit throughout the game. You can actually fight her on one of the mythic paths, for instance, and she's actually considered one of the more individually powerful Demon Lords. So two things of note when it comes to Nocticula is that she is the Lord of Darkness, Lust, and Shadow. She was actually the very first succubus. And as you can see in-game through the Midnight Bolts, she's actually very capable of killing other Demon Lords, which is why other Demon Lords don't really mess with her very much. Because of her realms of lust and things, she's literally known for seducing and murdering other Demon Lords. It's her whole thing. And because of this, they tend to give her a pretty wide berth. Probably one of the coolest things about this character, though, are the red runes that we can see inscribed on her wings. I think that is really cool. Like, the rest of her model is kind of like fairly standard succubi stuff, but the runes that are like etched into her wings are just insanely cool to me. Now that brings us to Baphomet. So Baphomet is the Lord of Beasts, Mazes, and Minotaurs. Now you might not think this when you first see him, but Baphomet is himself a Minotaur. He was actually the first Minotaur. In his life, shall you say, he was a Minotaur. However, he eventually died, at which point the god of beasts, Lamashtu, took his soul and personally transformed him from a petitioner of hers to her consort. Now, he used this position to establish himself as a demon lord, of course, but how he did that was in seeking favor from the mother of monsters, Lamashtu herself. Baphomet raided Hell, which is separate from the Abyss, which is where demons live, Hell being where the devils live. Baphomet raided Hell in an attempt to steal Asmodeus' ruby rod. However, this did not go his way. He was caught. Lamashtu denied knowing him, and as punishment, Asmodeus inscribed his own symbol on the Minotaur Lord's head and imprisoned him in a maze crafted by Asmodeus personally. Asmodeus actually considered it unsolvable. Now, this is actually the prison in which we encounter Baphomet towards the end of the game. Asmodeus actually made a mistake here because Baphomet is incredibly cunning. He actually solved the maze in about a decade, and then, not only did he solve it and escape, he literally stole the entire labyrinth from the plane of Hell. And that's incredible because the labyrinth itself is considered to be practically an entire world. It's literally like a plane of existence, which is now Baphomet's plane. Now, interestingly enough, and this is actually a really cool bit of lore about Baphomet, the reason he looks so more like a goat than a minotaur is because when he came back from Hell after this ordeal, it like warped his appearance to look emaciated, which is why he looks the way he does. Now, we're getting into the two Demon Lords that you'll see in game, but are a little less involved outside of one particular mythic path, but first up, we have, and I'm probably going to butcher both of these names, by the way, but Arish Kagal, or Aresh Kagal, maybe. Either way, this is the Demon Lord of Portals and Riddles, otherwise known as the Faceless Sphinx. We see a couple of copies of the Demon Lord, and then we actually meet the Demon Lord herself at the end of Ninio's quest, More Than Nothing. Now, we actually see a failed experiment of the Demon Lord throughout the game in a quest called the Secrets of Creation, that is to say the tile puzzles you'll find across the map. These were actually a trap laid for the storyteller by none other than Arish Kagal. However, it failed to actually capture him, and thus she herself considers it a failed experiment, and the copy of her that we can find at the end of that road is broken, and this is why it doesn't work. Now, we can encounter the actual Demon Lord herself at the top of her Enigma, which is kind of a subplane, if you will, of hers in the Abyss, and this is otherwise known as the Pyramid Puzzle. So, this is literally a plane filled with nothing but puzzles. It's otherwise known as the Enigma. It's just a slog of puzzles and things that is, again, the crux of Ninio's companion quest. And at the end, you have one of the probably toughest fights in the game, actually, with the boss herself. And last but not least, we have a name I'm going to try to pronounce, but will almost definitely get it wrong. Sokoth Banoth? I don't know. You meet him on the Trickster Mythic Path. That's where you see him a lot. He is the Demon Lord of Perversion and Taboo. He is actually Nocticula's brother, and grossly enough, her former lover. So weirdly enough, whereas most Demon Lords gave Nocticula a wide berth, she obviously had a relationship, shall we say, with her brother until that soured, which isn't really talked about in game, so I'm not going to go into it in depth here, but it didn't last, is probably the best way to put it. But the most interesting thing about Sokoth is that he is actually on good terms with most other Demon Lords, which is unusual because obviously they're usually plotting against each other and everything. However, with his sphere of perversion and taboo and the fact that he actually represents one of the sins, which is pride, he doesn't actually have a lot of interest in fighting all these other Demon Lords, basically. Not really up his alley, so to speak. There you go, guys. There are some of the Demon Lords we meet in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. There are actually tons of Demon Lords that we don't meet. Some are actually referenced in game, such as Pazuzu, Arish Kagal's sister, which has another very difficult to pronounce name, but she's the Lord of Scorpions. And again, there's a few others that are mentioned as well, but not actually seen. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of it, truly, thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom. I hope you have a tremendous Halloween and an amazing rest of your day.